Cyclist Jack Reed's first year on the national circuit in France has been one of learning, as much a mental battle as a physical one. Taking time out to recover from Epstein-Barr virus and hunting for a new team, he is more hungry than ever to turn the pedals again. Jack, thanks for coming in today. I'm really keen just to get a bit of an insight into your career, cycling, and how you've got to where you've got to, and then we can move on to what the future looks like as well. That'd be great. So, just opening up, where did your passion for cycling come from? Where did it all begin?
I think I've been very lucky. It's always been something in my family. My dad has always enjoyed cycling and watched it. And when me and my brother were growing up, we always would go on family bike rides. And then it wasn't until the Delancey Flyers started a good few years ago now that my brother started doing it. And to be honest, I was quite jealous of him doing it at the time. I wasn't old enough, but I thought, I'm going to definitely give that a try when I'm old enough. And sure enough, a couple of years later, I was able to join that. And then ever since then, I've been hooked really from doing them Wednesday nights at Delancey to then, as I got older, moving on to the road side of cycling and doing the local time trials here every weekend and then into the road racing. It really opened my mind up and sort of where I got a bug, going out with my friends and just messing about and really enjoying just riding my bike. And then the other sides of the racing came with that. And then obviously watching cycling all the time, it was really special for me.
It's going to be a big jump though to go from enjoying cycling to looking at making it a career. How did that begin? I think, to be honest, again, it was a lot with my brother. So my brother was very similar, and I've been very lucky. I've just been able to look up at what he did really. So he, back sort of 2018, 2019, he basically did what I've done this year, spent a few years in France racing his bike and moving up that French level of racing. And he really enjoyed it, but he just was caught out with the COVID year. And as we know, for a lot of people in a lot of sports, that's affected things. And he sort of lost his side, the enjoyment side of it. And that again came with the racing. It was always something I thought about when I watched the racing on the TV. I thought, one day I want to be a full-time cyclist and be there. And I've really just always believed in that. I finished school, I did my A-levels, and then I thought, right, now I'm going to give it a couple of years and just see how far I go and give it 100% for racing my bike away in Europe. What were those initial steps after school then?
So Brexit's complicated a lot of things. So once I finished my A-levels in June last year, I only had 90 days in Europe. But that worked out quite well because I finished in June and the season always finishes in October. So end of June, early July till October was pretty much my 90 days. And really, before that I had done the odd few races in France, but because I was at school still and I had commitments, I wasn't able to just go there and go, right, all I'm doing today is riding my bike, or all I'm doing is racing my bike. And that was probably the first big step, I would say, to that dream that goal I'd always gone on about was, the being full-time cyclist. And then, this year has brought other complications with trying to get a visa, but that was the main first part.
So you had that initial taste of it, and so you've moved on now. You signed with a team.
Yeah. So this year I was with a national Division 2 team, Velosport Valete, and they got in contact. So after I'd done my 3 months in France last year, they got in contact with me, and I also, going into that 3 months, I thought, well, I've always said I want to do this. This is 3 months to actually see if I want to do it, because again, it looks very nice on the TV and everything, but actually there are a lot of tough moments. So it really tested me to make sure I wanted to do it. And this Valete got in contact with me for this year, 2023. And I had such a great time last summer that I wanted to go back and do a whole full season. And it was just perfect timing that with the results I'd gotten last summer, that they got in contact with me and it worked out well.
So I guess that initial 3 months is almost putting yourself in a shop window as well, because it's a competitive environment out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I'm sort of still at a disadvantage now, how I've just gone from doing Guernsey races of sort of 10 riders maybe if you're lucky, to some French races I was doing both this year and last year where there's 200 riders. So, and also the Brittany area, everyone is well known, all the managers of teams talk all the time. So yeah, it was sort of, again, as you say, trying to put myself in that shop window for teams to look at me for that first 3 months, and it worked out well. And yeah, luckily I managed to get some results to help me.
And in terms of like that change of culture as well, like you mentioned it there, you're going from Velo Club races over here where it might be 10, 20, 30 people, going across into France, different language, different style of racing. How do you even begin to go about adapting to that?
It's very interesting. I've been to France quite a lot with my family in the past for holidays, so I think that's helped. I've understood the culture a bit more, but definitely I didn't speak a word of French before I went last summer, so I sort of wish I'd tried a bit harder at school in that side of it. But yeah, it's a huge everything, just the lifestyle of the French, even the racing. I mean, when these towns have the races, it's like a holiday for that town. They'll shut all the roads for the whole weekend, and it will become a big party, and everyone will come out and watch this bike race in the town, which is really nice to see. And people cheering on, it makes it that real special feeling. Yeah.
And moving on into the beginning of this season, obviously this is going to be your first taste of being with a team. How does that sort of pre-season come about, and what do you do?
Yeah, so it's a lot of team building in the sort of winter time. Obviously, going into this team, I was the youngest rider. That everyone was a lot older than me. They had a lot more years of experience. So I was sort of the rookie. So I was expecting that I would be working for these other riders a lot. So it was very important that you got sort of that team bonding with them all, and that I knew at races I'd be sacrificing my result to help them out. So lots of the early stuff is I went over in November last year to just completely off the bike stuff, just doing team bonding, activities off the bike, and also just other sports like running and stuff, just to really knit in with that team. And then once I moved to France, before the season started in January this year, we went on a training camp in Spain, which was all riding, but again, it's being around the team all the time, and that also was perfect for me because I had no other option other to speak French or nothing. So it really chucked me in the deep end, which at the time was scary, but looking back on it now, them weeks where I was on my own, or I was the only English person there and they were French, really helped me improve with my speaking. But yeah, it's all a lot about team bonding before the season starts. So you're really committed when the races start to work together as a team, because I think people in cycling see it as quite an individual sport, but actually something I've realised this last year is that having that strong team bond makes a massive difference to who wins or not.
What kind of training were you doing on those camps as well? Is that
with the one in January?
Yeah.
So the one in January, we went to Spain, just near Girona, which is a big sort of cycling hub. And it was lots of long hours on the bike. Luckily, the weather was a lot nicer than it was in Brittany at the time. And also it was sort of simulating race situations. So we were practicing sprint lead outs for the end of the race and seeing who works best where, and trying to basically get the team together on the bike. Lots of scenarios of if there was crosswinds in a race, how it would play out, and really getting to know each rider's strengths and weaknesses and how we can work on that, as well as doing lots of training. So it was, yeah, both good to steer on the bike and then debrief off the bike and see how we can improve it before the season started.
Where did you base yourself?
Oh, so this year I've been based just outside Dinan in Brittany. Lovely area and great for riding.
And how does that kind of choice come about as well? Like where you end up living and who you end up living with, is that?
Yeah, so I've been really lucky that as I was saying earlier, me and my family have always gone on holidays to France, and we have a holiday house there that we've used for years. Just to start off with, just going on holiday, and then obviously with my brother being in France and then me being in France has actually worked out really well and become really lucky with it. So I've been living on my own there in this small town called Calougan, which is lovely. I'm very lucky with that, because I know a lot of other English riders that have struggled to find places to stay in France or have to share with other families. And also having that sort of house for a long time really helped with my visa last year, because they want sort of a certain place where you'd be living in your, I guess, address, where other riders don't actually have a full-on address.
And I guess that also helps you settle in as well. Like,
yeah,
you don't feel quite
definitely.
as isolated.
It's got that sort, because I've been there so many times, I've got that homey vibe to it. Again, speaking to other riders, you can feel homesick if you don't know your surroundings, where to me it's a second home, and I feel at home pretty much there. So I'm very grateful to have the house there, and where it's situated has been really good for me.
So you're back to the beginning of the season as well. You go off on the training camp. What happens in terms of racing and race selection and who does what? How does that all pan out? Yeah,
so again, when I was on these training camps and training sessions early in the year, the team were keeping an eye on what form people are on and how they were going. And also, there's the races throughout the whole year. We had a calendar sent to us and we picked what we would like to do. But also, when the team decided, or when the managers actually decided the final team for races, they would see who would suit more. So I would say I prefer hills and a long, hard race. So I'd be selected for more of the hillier races, where the sprinters in the team would go for more of the flat races. But I'd say I probably didn't have as much say as I wanted to, because I was the rookie. And also, I think it's important in the first year to get a mixture of all sort of racing and help out with as many races as you can. Whereas the older riders in the team, this was their third, fourth year of doing this. So they knew, I did well at this race last year. I want to go there and get a podium or win it this year. So for me, it was a lot of just finding my feet and seeing what was best for me. And that was my whole thing this year, was to just learn as much as I can in this bigger category compared to the junior level I was last year.
And the first race, how did that all pan out?
Not great. The start of the season, I had some bad luck. I was involved in quite a few crashes, especially the first few races of the season. Everyone's very panicky and full of adrenaline, because it's been 4 or 5 months since they've last done a race. Lots of pressures are put on all these teams and riders to get wins and top results and everything. The start of the season didn't go well for me. But again, the team were really helpful with it, and they were very supportive in terms of building me back up from these few mistakes I had at the start, and picked better races for me. And then I regained my confidence, and once I got flowing into sort of March and April races, I was fine. It just was a few hiccups at the start of the year.
And what would you say you spoke about it being a learning year, but so what lessons have you learned? What were the biggest?
A lot, I would say, for me this year especially, is mentally. That's been the most challenging. I always knew it would be tough, and I knew that going into this team and this level would be a big step up for me. But it was definitely more of the mental side of it, which was the biggest thing. And I think especially with living on my own and not having, and obviously being an English person in France was difficult, because, for example, if I had a bad race or had a tough training day, when I got home I didn't have my family or friends to talk it through. Obviously I could call my parents whenever I want, but it was that sort of, that trying to talk it through with someone was difficult. And also a lot of the French riders, they go back to their families as well, and they can sort of forget about it, where I in my head, I was sort of, I'm in France to ride my bike, to race my bike, and that's all I could think about. And sometimes it can get quite difficult where you're just thinking over things constantly all the time. But I learned to just switch off when situations like that happen. But yeah, the first few hiccups at the start of the year, I was like, oh, have I made the right decision here? What am I getting myself into? But you quickly learn, and I think it's good learning for the whole just body and mindset of the challenges that I've faced this year.
And you were back in Guernsey for the Island Games as well, weren't you?
Yeah. So I was very lucky enough to be selected for the Island Games this year. Obviously, it was difficult with selection process because I had, before the Island Games, I hadn't raced in Guernsey for over a year and a half. So it was very hard for the selectioners to actually compare me to the other riders. But yeah, luckily enough, I was picked for it, and it was just an incredible week. I think it was my first Island Games, but there were riders on the team that it was their fifth Island Games, and they never experienced anything like it. The crowds, the atmosphere, it was just unbelievable. I mean, the crowds and the supporters in France are great, but they're not all cheering my name, so that was a big difference. Or supporting Guernsey, so it was amazing to have my family on the side of the road, friends, my mates from school who I hadn't seen in a year, to be cheering me on the side of the road and supporting me, and just that whole week was unbelievable. And the way the whole cycling team, both road and mountain biking, did that week was just awesome. But also where I was more on the road side, I think all the five of us boys just did a great job, and Sam Caldwell managing to win with 2 gold medals was a very special thing.
Well, you touched on it a bit earlier, and it sort of feeds into the Island Games, but about the sort of team ethic that goes into cycling as well. Can you just explain a bit more about that? Yeah,
I think that, as I said, that I think people don't, when they watch cycling or see it, they don't realise how important having a strong team behind you and backing you makes for that person to win the race. And that was at the Island Games, really. In the road race, we'd planned it. Obviously, we knew the course. The course was very suited to the riders that we had, and we'd been planning it for months how we wanted it to play out. And we were just lucky enough that we were able to perfectly execute it on the day. It's not often. Of course, every team wants to win, so every team has the same idea. So to actually get the plan to work out and for a team to win is what's special, and it makes then people that sacrifice themselves early on in the race feel like they've also won as well. And I think that's an important thing, that whole team celebrating is a big part of it.
And for you, moving back into France, though, for you as a new rider, are you slightly conflicted in terms of you've got to work for the team, but also you want to make sure that you're getting exposure for the next stage of your career? Yeah,
I think looking back at what I thought at the start of the year, obviously I didn't know how the whole situation with the team now would fall out or would play out. But it's quite common that for a rookie in a team, normally they'd be at a team for 2, maybe 3 years, and the first 1 or 2 years is sort of building your confidence in the racing, working for others, and at a certain point your opportunity will come. And I think that's important, and there's lots of other people that are like that. It's not common, or it's not very common, that people will go from a junior level into a team and be the best, be the person they're riding for, or if they are, they'll be in the World Tour in the next year after. So it's a lot of learning, and I think that's just a thing in France that is quite normal for people to sort of get used to.
And coming more into the back end of the season now, I think like you've put some posts up that you were struggling slightly with form, or you didn't feel it was going well. So when did that sort of first come about, and what's happened since?
Yeah, so I think after last year with the results I'd got, I'd really was expecting a lot out of this season. I trained really hard through the winter, but I kept getting ill. And it was really hard to stay consistent with my training. And I was getting ill from something at least once a month, and that was really having an effect on my form, my training, that I just wasn't getting the repeated weeks that I needed to, or the repeated races in. And that's, as I said, where the mental knocks really came in, and I really struggled on that side of it. It was hard to get back up every time and go, right, let's start again, and then get it again. And also I just felt that something was missing for quite a lot of the season. I obviously had great moments like during the Island Games and certain races at the start of the year, but I just didn't feel myself, and when I was riding the bike, I wasn't getting them high numbers that I was getting last year. And every other year I've ridden my bike, because I'm still young, I improve massively every year. And this year I was questioning myself, going, but this isn't happening. This is very weird. And then again, your head starts questioning, is this it? Is this the highest I'm ever going to get to? How am I going to try and one day achieve my goal of being at that top level? And it's something that had been on my mind for a long time, and that I'd thought about getting blood tests. And then how it ended up happening was I was driving to a race at the end of August, and my car broke down. And obviously, being on my own in France and my car breaking down, and that's the only way I can get to races, I sort of thought, right, okay, I'm going to have to go back to Guernsey to get this fixed. And it's not something I could probably do in France, because obviously they're different cars with the steering and everything. So I came back to Guernsey and got some blood tests done. And it's still, I didn't know what was, like, confused with myself. I was tired all the time, really fatigued. And then I got the blood test results, and then, my doctor said that I tested positive for Epstein-Barr. And that was just a real big, a big relief, but also an answer to a lot of my questions. I just, for so long, been thinking it was, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? This is it. And then having that sort of answer made me realise, okay, this might explain a lot of the feelings that I'd been having this year. And basically what I'd been doing wrong is not resting enough. Similar to Mark Cavendish a couple of years ago, I'd been getting ill, but then once I felt good again, I was just hammering myself on the bike, doing long hours and fatiguing myself again, to my immune system being so low that I would just catch anything, any bug, and then it would just start again. It was just a repeated cycle, and that I just needed to stop riding my bike, or it wasn't going to ever leave my system or just keep happening. So yeah, it's been a interesting month. I've not been able to ride my bike. I've been climbing the wall, or doing, not even just riding my bike, just doing no exercise, just complete rest. And obviously I've been back in Guernsey for the last month, so I've been pretty bored at times and just climbing the walls trying to do anything. But I think I'm certainly feeling a lot better than I did a month ago, which is the most important thing for my recovery.
I mean, I guess like the mental side of it, that must be so much of a relief. I think you touched on it there, and to be able to see like a path forward as well, instead of like just this cycle of exhaustion and an illness, and not seeing the progress that you wanted to see. Yeah,
definitely. I think it was just, obviously it wasn't the best situation for me with what my current situation is for next year, but it was also a big relief and an answer to all these questions that I'd been asking myself. Why am I not right? Why am I not hitting the form I was at last year? What's wrong with me? And again, not being able to have someone in the house with me all the time to answer them questions, really just, you keep going on that cycle.
What kind of support do you get from the team in these situations as well?
It's a hard one, because obviously, again, I was new, so it wasn't until about June, July time that I really, really got to know everyone really well. Once you've been on multiple race weekends and weeks away with the riders and stayed with them and really got to know them, that I was like, I'm in a good place now. I really feel like know everyone here. as I said at the start of the year, the team had been really good with support and everything, helping me. But it was when I tried explaining to them why, again, they were very similar with me, that we didn't really know. Obviously, I'd been telling them I'd been feeling unwell and I hadn't been doing well at races. But they, just like me, didn't know what was the situation. So once I explained it to them, I had Epstein-Barr, that it really answered a lot of questions, and they also understood as well. But yeah, sometimes the people in France can be slightly old-fashioned with things, but luckily the people on my team were really supportive about it, and I've been lucky with that throughout the whole year.
And so in terms of like the team situation as well, because they're stepping down a level now, is that?
Yeah, so that also is another whole stress to, obviously once I realised I'd tested positive, that I went, this also isn't good for my team situation. So I have to say they were really good about it. It was just before the Island Games, in about the end of June, we had a team meeting, and they basically said that they don't have the sponsors are pulling out for next year, and that they won't be able to carry on at the national Division 2 level. They were originally on about staying at the Division 3, so going down a division, just because the budget's a lot less and they don't have to have paid staff. So to start off with, I was like, that's good. I obviously would like to stay at the level I've been at this year, but it's not the end of the world. And then after the Island Games and I'd come back, they sort of tried working it out more and adding up how they could do it for this next year. And they just realised it wasn't possible, and that they would be going from the national division level to sort of club level, which any team in France or any club in France can be. It's just your normal riders that want to do a bit of racing at the weekend, and not that serious level where you do the elite national level of racing. So yeah, obviously after that I thought, I'm going to have to go through this whole process of trying to find a new team for next year. And that whole side of it was a big stress as well, trying to find a team and not having many results this year because I'd been working for the team or I'd been getting ill. So yeah, once I found out what had happened last month with my illness, as much of a relief as it was, I was like, I still don't currently have a team, and I can't race my bike for the rest of the year, where ideally right now I need to be in France racing my bike as much as I can to get my name out there for teams to look at me. So that whole side of it was frustrating as well, because there wasn't much I could do about it, but it was just that mental side again.
And what do you do now? How do you go about finding a team?
So it's I guess it's similar to just applying for a job. Luckily, again, the team have been really helpful with it, and they told us so early that it's given us a lot of time to be able to do this. I know situations in the past where it's been this time of year, end of September, where teams have told their riders that they're finished, go find a new team, and basically they've got no chance of getting a team because most teams are full by the start of September. So yeah, after the Island Games, start of August, I started making a cycling CV, I guess, where it's got sort of my best race results, what type of rider am I, some of the more technical side of it, and then the current team gave me lots of contact details of other managers from teams, and that you just basically send off your CV to these teams and ask do they have places for you next year, and would you be willing to take me on? So it's a lot of trial and error process, I guess. It's a lot of sending off, waiting for a response, or sometimes you just won't get a response. Or I sent all of mine off and I had a good few teams come back to me and said, thanks for the CV, we like what you've got, but we'll keep an eye on your results for the rest of the season. And for me, that's not the most ideal situation. So yeah, and then once I started having some interest from certain teams, it was trying to work out what was best for me while keeping everyone happy. So it's stressful, but I also kind of enjoy it. It's a very tactical sort of like a game of chess sort of thing where you have to keep the best option open while also knowing what's most secure. And I've definitely, from doing it a bit this year and last year, I've made a few mistakes in terms of leaving one team too long thinking I was going to get another option, and then it didn't work out, and then I got nothing. And then it's sort of like, I should have just taken it when I had the opportunity. So, yeah, there's a good side of that that's all still learning as well. But again, I've only ever done it twice, where lots of older riders have done it multiple times. But obviously, ideally, the start of the year, I thought I would be staying with Valet for a few years, and that wouldn't be a problem. But that's the sport. I think both COVID has had a massive part of the sport in terms of sponsorship and funding for teams. I mean, it's the same in the UK, and it's just as getting as bad in France now, really. Luckily, there's such a big community that they're able to have that more funding. But yeah, I think both riders and teams are feeling the effects of the COVID years.
It's a huge amount of uncertainty being a rider, isn't there, in terms of whether the teams get the sponsorship, which they're going about every year, whether your form continues, whether you stay healthy to stay as a rider as well.
Yeah, I think it's that thing where from February to October you can pretty much race 3 to 4 times a week if you really wanted to. So it's just racing, rest, trying to be at your top all the time. So you're keeping yourself happy, you're keeping your team happy, and if you're keeping the team happy, keeping the sponsors happy, and it's that sort of continuous thing. And that's where I go back to saying it's so important that team bonding at the start of the year is done well, because if the team don't get on, the results won't come, and then it'll affect the team and affect the sponsors, and sometimes it's just completely out of their hands. There's a big team in Brittany actually called Sojasun, which have been around for years and have done the Tour de France and have over the years gone back to a smaller level, but they've had a great team this year. They've been winning lots of races, but the sponsors can't pay the money to them anymore, and they've had to fold. And it's that situation where all them riders who are at that good level have got to find a team, and it's once it gets to September and you don't have anything yet, that's where it starts getting a bit interesting, and you have to look at other options and start thinking about what you want to do.
It's obviously like being a cyclist is difficult, but it's difficult financially as well in terms of like how you go about funding this dream of racing in France. Like how have you gone about that?
Again, it's very similar to the sort of the cycling CV that was on about how you have to put your name and your CV forward. It's very similar with trying to find sponsors. I've been very lucky this year that I've been sponsored by Watts & Co. Or Watts Property Consultants, and also a company in the UK called Pedal Potential. And to be honest, without their support, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done. I wouldn't have been able to live and enjoy this amazing dream that I've had. And it's all trying to find people that are interested in what I'm doing. And obviously it's hard from a Guernsey perspective because I'm out in France and they're a company in Guernsey. So it's trying to do the best. They're helping me out loads, but it's trying to help them out as much as I can so they can get back from it as well. I've been really appreciative of both of them sponsors, especially Jo this year with all of her support that she's given me.
And I guess some of that exposure as well, like comes from some of the social media stuff that you've been doing as well. I mean, I told you before, I was watching the YouTube videos. It's a really insightful kind of side to things.
That was my idea when I started the YouTube channel. When I went last year, it was all about, to me, this is what I know, this is what I do every day, but to some person on the street, they might know not much about cycling, so it's trying to give them a better understanding of what I do before a race, what the race was like, how I train, how I recover. And I think, I've really tried to show that to people online this year. And then also try and help Jo and these sponsors back by giving them support online as well, and hopefully building their brands and their companies to get word out about what they do.
I was hoping you could give us a bit of an insight into a daily or weekly routine when you're in France?
Yeah, sure. It's not the most exciting thing to someone else. To me, I love it. And it's probably, I have had it where I've realised that the big difference from being a full-time athlete to what I've been in the past, where I've had school around it or work around it, is the rest. You can do the same amount of riding pretty much if you have the time, but it's the time that you're on your feet or sitting on a sofa is the most important thing. So my sleep, one of the biggest changes I had was just getting good night's sleep all the time, because that's when you recover your most, and that's where all that training sort of actually goes into your system. So it's normally, I try to be an early bird, but you can get into a bad routine of getting up late when you've only got to ride your bike. So it's normally, again, it varies on what training I've got on that week or what racing. But most of the time it would be, getting up in the mornings, sorting out emails and stuff, because normally it's the team email me often about what races I've got coming up or what I need to sort out, or I need to put my name down on the calendar. Then it's doing a 3-4 hours training ride in the middle of the day, especially in the summer, because the races in France are at midday most of the time, and sometimes I struggle in the heat. So instead of getting out early, I try to train and do my efforts in the heat to sort of simulate what it would be like in a race, so I can adapt to the heat, because sometimes even just in Brittany it can get like 30-35 degrees, and that's a very important part to performance. So I normally try and train in early to late afternoon, and then, like I said, it's just trying to rest as much as you can when you get back from that ride, make sure you're fueling enough, your protein shakes, and then it's just cooking in the evening, just trying to chill out. But I've pretty much watched a lot of Netflix now, so but it's a great, to be honest. I mean, I can't complain about anything. How lucky I've been this year with just literally, what have I got to get up to for today? I've got to ride my bike. It's just so grateful that I am, and also having this time off in the last month with the virus has really made me appreciate what I have, and that I can just go on my bike whenever I want, and that a bad day for me is having to ride my bike in the rain. And I can't complain about anything really. I'm very lucky with what I've got out there. Obviously, with around races, it's a lot more busier with travelling. Like I've said that my team Valette was based just outside Nantes, so getting down to the team for races and that was long hours in the car, but you get used to it quite quickly. Races, it's, say if a race was on a Sunday, I'd probably drive down late Friday. I'd be able to stay with the team on the Friday night, then we'd drive to the race on the Saturday, do a recon of the course, the circuit with all the riders, see how it goes, go back to the hotel, massage, have our foods, maybe do our briefing that night, and then it's just resting for the next day. And then the Sunday would be the big race day, and then it's just sort of the Sunday night is just a late night driving home. Normally I prefer to just get back home and being on my own bed on the Sunday night than on the Monday, but sometimes that can be midweek as well. But I've got it pretty easy.
Could you take us into the middle of a race? You're in the peloton. What's it like? What's the atmosphere like? What's the movement like?
Again, it varies on the race. I've had a few races this year. Definitely, I would say more on stage races where it's the second or third day, where it'll be really hard at the start, at the end, but you can be pootling along in the middle bit. But I've also had races where it's flat out for the whole race, and you're like, right, at some point this is going to slow down, and it just doesn't all day, and it's just stressful and crashes. And if you're going through towns and that, it's knowing what's coming up and what street furniture there is. So it really varies. I always say it's the start and the end of the race is very similar. The middle bit is just luck of the day. You might have a day where it's not super hard, or you might have a day where it's just ridiculous all day. And it also varies what you're going in as a team and as a rider, what you're trying to get out of the race. Because a lot of the time you can make it as hard as you want. If you want to just sit in the bunch and try and get round the race, then you can do that. But if you want to go for the win and try and get a good result, then you can follow that path. But it's normally a lot of swearing and French and a lot of shouting and trying to dodge water bottles and things on the side of the road, which, sometimes what I realised at the start of the year with my racing was, I was like, whoa, this is actually sometimes more mentally tiring than actually physically. Trying to concentrate for 4 hours on what's going on around me and everything is a lot harder than actually how hard the race is. You sort of forget, as long as I'm pedalling, I can forget about it. And that's the sort of things that people learn in their first year in the step up, is these other guys have done this for multiple years, so they're used to that. They can be a bit more chilled out with knowing what's going on around them, where to me this was all a new experience and trying to get used to it.
Dreams for the future? Where would you like to take it?
I would like to become a professional cyclist. So obviously I'm working at that level, but where I'd be at a pro team, doing some of the bigger races that in the World Tour calendar. I still love the sport. I still have this passion that I feel like I did when I was younger. And it's just, as I said, I want to just few years where I just give it everything and see how far I get. But I feel like cycling is going to be a part of my life no matter what happens, and that I always will have the bike. But it's seeing how far I can get with it as a racing side of it. As much as there's been difficult points in this year, when I look back on where I've gone, what I've done with the bike, I've loved every minute of it, and that's what I want to do it again in the coming years and see how far I can get with it.
That's brilliant. Appreciate your time.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me on. Cheers.